We've heard the phrase fool's gold many times, but what about a fool's alien? Could this be the case for all of the supposed extraterrestrial visitors who allegedly came to Earth in the distant past? Are we chasing shadows or smoke and mirrors? Today, we look at the evidence left behind by the alleged Roswell UFO. Did it really happen, or was it just a mirage? It's up to you to decide. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. And today we are going to discuss some more alien artifacts that have supposedly been recovered from the alleged crash site of a UFO near Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. This is something that I am very interested in because this story gets a lot of attention, and there's a lot of conflicting stories surrounding it. But these are stories that need to be told because they are interesting even if they are false. That being said, let's start off with a quote from one of the people involved in this story, which may give you an idea of where this is going. In my opinion, there are no coincidences when it comes to this subject. As long as we continue to ignore this undeniable truth, we will never move forward. This quote is from investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe, who is also involved in this story. With that being said, let's dive into the facts of the case. In the episode of Ancient Aliens called The Secret Archives, investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe, famous paranormal researcher and self-ascribed UFO Giorgio Tsoukalos, and geologist Frank Kimbler go over some physical evidence that could prove that aliens did visit our world thousands of years ago. Now, this evidence comes from many different places, including the deserts outside of Roswell, New Mexico, where a UFO is said to have crashed in 1947. The group goes over several pieces of evidence, but two of them seem to stand out among the rest. They are very small and can easily be overlooked. Frank has spent years combing through the area looking for anything he can find. In his search, he uses metal detectors and special infrared technology that can detect minerals that might not show up on radar. With this technology, he found some extremely small, incredibly dense fragments that are so oddly shaped that he says they must have come from outer space. These are unlike any rock or mineral he has ever seen in his life. Frank claims that the minerals that make up these rocks are not found on Earth. Now, before I get into the details of these tiny pieces of metal, I want to say that many of the things we talk about on this channel are unproven. There is always the possibility that what we see could have another explanation. So keep an open mind and remember that. With that being said, let's get into the fascinating discovery of these small fragments. These fragments were found at the alleged skip site, where according to reports, the UFO seemed to have skipped across the ground before finally crashing and burning near Corona. Frank discovered these small pieces using a metal detector. After he found them, he took them to a lab where they could determine what exactly they were made out of. After a great deal of testing, the scientists were unable to determine exactly what these strange objects were made out of. Now, after hearing this, you may be thinking, well, of course, they couldn't tell what they were made out of because they were obviously put there as a hoax. But according to Frank and those working with him, the pieces of debris are much too old to be a recent hoax. The debris is covered in a patina that comes only from decades of erosion. Also, why would someone bother to cover up a UFO sighting from 1947 now? I know that there are many skeptics out there, but if you were going to fake a UFO sighting, wouldn't you think that we would have had enough by now? How many UFO hoaxes have you seen over the years? Are we really supposed to believe that every single one of them is a hoax? According to Giorgio, these pieces of debris may be some of the most important evidence we have that there was indeed a UFO crash in 1947. According to him, these pieces of metal could possibly have come from an advanced spaceship that was traveling through the cosmos until it went down on Earth. He says that these strange pieces of metal are proof that we are not alone in the universe. We just need to keep searching. It's me here, and I have to agree with him on that last part. We are definitely not alone in the universe. Whether or not these pieces of metal are from outer space is yet to be determined. But I do believe that we are not alone in the universe. I know that that's kind of beside the point, but I believe it nonetheless. Let's go back to Frank. He says that the search for these fragments was quite difficult. He had to travel to various locations around the crash site and comb through the debris using his metal detector. This was not easy work. He spent many hours combing through the desert sand and dirt, but he was eventually rewarded with these strange fragments. One of these fragments is a triangular piece that seems to almost look like a piece of foil. When Frank first found this, he said that he knew it was something special. He says that the way it was bent makes it clear that it didn't come from this world. Now again, you may be thinking that he's just saying this because he wants to believe in aliens. But remember that this is a man who has studied geology for decades. He knows rocks and metals, and he says that these are unlike anything he has ever seen. He says that these pieces of metal are not magnetic and they don't react to electricity in any way. This makes them very strange because most metals do react to either magnets or electricity. The fact that they don't react to anything is strange. Another thing that Frank mentions is that these fragments all seem to be made out of the same material, despite the fact that they were found in different locations. He says that it is very unlikely that all of these pieces of debris are made out of the same material, if they are from different sources. Now, if all of this wasn't strange enough, there is one more thing that Frank noticed about these fragments that really makes you wonder. He says that the pieces of metal seem to almost be alive. He says that they hum when you touch them, and that he can feel a strange energy coming off of them. Now, He admits that this is very hard to explain and that he doesn't really understand it himself, but he says that he knows it's there. Now, I know that many of you are probably thinking that this is just a bunch of nonsense, but I want you to keep an open mind. There is a possibility that these fragments really are from an alien spacecraft. If that is true, then it would mean that there really was a UFO crash in 1947. If you believe that this happened, then you might want to take a closer look at the other videos that have been released. Maybe there is something there that we are missing. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Linda says that there is no way that all of this could be a coincidence. She believes that there really is an alien presence here on Earth and that these fragments are proof. According to her, these fragments are just the tip of the iceberg. She says that there is much more evidence out there that we just haven't found yet. According to her, the government is hiding a lot of evidence from us and that we deserve to know the truth. I agree with her on that last part. I think that we deserve to know the truth about what's going on in the world and that the government should be more open with us. But I'm getting a little sidetracked. Back to the video. According to Linda, these fragments are so important because they are proof that there really is a connection between us and the stars. She says that we are not alone in the universe and that there are other beings out there just like us, beings that have visited our world in the past. She says that the government is trying to hide this from us, but that we deserve to know the truth. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Do you believe that these pieces of metal are from an alien spaceship that crashed in New Mexico in 19... If not, do you have any other theories as to what they could be? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, if you liked this video, be sure to check out more content. I'll see you next time. Hi everyone, it's me. This is my channel. I want to share a story about an unidentified object that was sent to Linda Moulton Howe in 1996. It's weird because it appears to be a naturally occurring layered alloy of bismuth, magnesium and zinc. Scientists who examined the samples say they've never seen anything like it before. They couldn't figure out if it was made by humans or if it's something natural. And even the most advanced metallurgy firms in the world have been unable to duplicate its creation. So we don't know how it formed, which is very unusual for materials scientists. The samples were received anonymously in November of 1996. According to Linda Art Bell, the host of the radio show Coast to Coast, received a call from a man in South Dakota who said he had some materials he wanted to send to someone who could determine what they were. He explained that they came from his deceased grandfather, who was a sergeant in the U.S. Army. The grandfather apparently acquired them while overseas during World War II. Art Bell didn't know anyone who could analyze the materials, so he called Linda Moulton Howe, who was used to receiving mysterious samples like this. She agreed to take them off his hands. She told me that she received two pieces in the mail, one about the size of a postage stamp and the other roughly the size of half a sheet of paper. Both were wrapped in brown paper and inside that was another layer of aluminum foil. And inside that was the actual material itself. It looked like a silvery gray sheet with some sort of black residue covering it. When she showed them to a friend, James E. McCann, an optometrist and amateur Christian, so off it went to the laboratory where it was determined that the material was a solid solution of bismuth with alternating layers of magnesium and zinc. But there was a problem. The pattern repeated itself over and over again at a microscopic level. But it shouldn't be possible for layers that thin to form naturally. We'll talk more about that in a minute. First, let's explore how these types of alloys are usually made. There are three main ways that metals are combined to make alloys. The first is by melting them together at high temperatures. You can do this by heating them together in a crucible or simply by throwing them in a furnace. The second method is to mix powdered metals together and then heat them to a high enough temperature that they bond together. The third way is electrolysis, which is when you use an electric current to cause a chemical reaction between two metals. Each of these methods works for creating alloys, but none of them can explain how this strange material was created. In order to understand why, let's look at the structure of the material. In regular metallic materials, the atoms are arranged in a regular periodic structure. Think of it like a brick wall. All metals are crystalline solids, which means their atoms are arranged in a highly ordered repeating pattern. Layers of atoms sit on top of each other, and within each layer, the atoms are bonded together by metallic bonds. A metallic bond is formed when two atoms come close enough together that their outer shell electrons are shared between them. In regular alloys, different metals are combined by mixing their atoms together into this regular lattice structure. In this case, the bismuth atoms alternate with the zinc and magnesium atoms, and all of these metallic bonds hold the structure together. But here's the thing. In order to get metals to combine like this, you need high temperatures and high pressure. Metals are usually heated to around 2000 degrees Fahrenheit or 1100 degrees Celsius, which is over 20 times hotter than the hottest place in a furnace. How could something like this form naturally without temperatures like that? Well, according to the lab tests, this specimen may have formed under conditions similar to those found deep within the Earth's crust or the sea. Here's what they wrote in their report. These results indicate that the alloy probably formed from a magnesium-rich fluid interacting with a zinc-bearing phase at temperatures and pressures greater than those found in typical sedimentary environments. Thus, formation of the alloy could have taken place during burial of sediments on the seafloor or in a similar geological setting. Okay, So maybe this is some sort of rare natural phenomenon. Let's talk about that. Now, while it's true that pressure can increase the boiling point of liquids, it can't raise temperatures anywhere near hot enough to create this material. If that were true, water wouldn't boil at 212 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level. It would boil at thousands of degrees. Also, wouldn't the material just fall apart if the Earth's crust cooled down? Wouldn't the atoms revert back to their original state? These are good questions, but the scientists who examined it believe it as stable because of the extreme pressure hundreds or thousands of feet below the Earth's surface. That pressure keeps the atoms in place. But here's another problem. It's unlikely that such a material would remain intact once it's brought to the surface. Usually when rocks and minerals are brought to the surface, they're exposed to air, which causes oxidation and other chemical reactions to occur. So this material should have disintegrated long ago. Furthermore, the people who initially discovered it said it came from a river. Such a site would likely be full of other minerals and rocks, yet nothing else like this material has ever been found. What about industrial processes? Could this have been made by melting the metals together at really high temperatures and pressures? Well, according to the lab analysis, that's not likely either. Their report reads, "The present study demonstrates that the alloy is not produced by any known metallurgical process. The extreme fineness of the lamella structure, coupled with the fact that it is not produced by melting, indicates that it is not an artifact of any known industrial process." So it appears that this material wasn't made by humans, nor does it appear to be something that formed naturally. It also doesn't appear to have been made by any known industrial process. So here we have this material that we can't identify. What do we do next? The answer, as it often is more research. According to Linda, she sent the material to several of the best metallurgy firms in the world, like Bethlehem Steel and the Colorado School of Mines. She wanted to see if they could figure out how the material was made, but they couldn't. No one has been able to figure out how it was made, which is kind of amazing. I'm not sure why this story gets overlooked so often. Maybe it's because it was covered on Coast to Coast AM. It's often dismissed as some sort of hoax, but it seems pretty clear that Linda wasn't trying to pull anyone's leg. Just listen to this. "It doesn't seem important to me whether it's a hoax or not," she says. "It is more important to me that people pay attention to the fact that there are things we do want to know. It's more interesting to me how little we know than how much we know." Furthermore, the lab analysis is very clear. There's no indication whatsoever that this was fabricated. I think people just get confused by the fact that no one knows what it is, so they assume it's fake. But why would someone go through the effort to make something like this only to have it analyzed and published for everyone to see? It makes no sense. And it's not the only strange material that's been sent to Linda's office. How much time do we have left? Okay, so we have 4 minutes left. I want to tell you about one other strange material that was sent to her. This one was sent to her in 2001 by a woman who said her father found it in 1975 in a gravel pit in Indiana. It was sitting in a pile of gravel and it looked like it was man-made, but it was definitely not from that time period. It appeared to be a tube made of stacked metal sheets. They were very thin, like 1/100th the thickness of a sheet of paper. The layers were bent at a 90-degree angle to each other, almost like they were put there by machine. But the thing was, this was 200 years before any kind of metalworking machines were invented. Whatever this material was, it was soft enough to be cut with a hacksaw, yet it was also strong enough to withstand being crushed by a bulldozer. That's because these tubes were incredibly dense and heavy. They measured 12 inches long and 3 inches in diameter. And when Linda asked if she could borrow them for research, the owner of the property said no, fearing that the government might try to confiscate them. Linda sent a small piece to the lab and the analysis revealed something incredible. The tube was made of 99.9% pure iron with traces of manganese, phosphorus and sulfur. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part was that the iron was pure, like only one type of ore on Earth has this high concentration of iron. And that ore can only be found in one place, in the Middle East. So how did this get to Indiana? Who knows? It is possible that these tubes are connected to ancient trade routes that reached the Americas long before Columbus. Or maybe they fell to Earth in a meteorite. Who knows? But one thing is for sure, whatever these materials are, they're extremely rare and valuable. And if you know where to look, you can find them all over the United States. There's a book called The UFO Encyclopedia by Jerome Clark. On page 568, there's a list of 13 sites where various UFO-related artifacts have been found. Some of the items include a burned piece of metal found on a farm in Kansas, a charred fragment of metal found near a crashed UFO in New Mexico, a chunk of metal found in a hayfield in Ohio, a metal plate found embedded in a tree in Wisconsin, a metal fragment found in a cornfield in Nebraska, and a metal tube found near an impact crater in Arizona. Some of these objects have been analyzed by independent labs, and none of them can explain their origins. So I ask you, what do you think they are? Let me know your theories in the comments section. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. We have a podcast now. It's available on Spotify, Apple, and Google. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. This is a reporter from the channel, and this is our news update for today's date. It is about a case that is going to make you believe in aliens again, or perhaps it will shake your faith in science, you decide. In July 1991, Linda was sent to investigate strange crop formations that appeared overnight in a field near Milk Hill in UK farmers had reported the flattening of their crops, and they were sure that someone had come in during the night and flattened them with some kind of a roller. But what she saw when she arrived at the site didn't make sense. It was not consistent with anything she knew of relating to mechanical pressure. Instead, Linda noticed something that hadn't been reported. The plants weren't just flattened, they were mysteriously blown apart at their nodes. At first she thought she was dealing with some sort of an insect infestation, because she could see small holes where insects might have entered the stem of the plant. However, she soon realized that this was not the case because the holes were too small for any known insect to crawl through. Moreover, if this had been the case, there would have been a lot more damage to the plants. But there wasn't. There was only damage to the nodes of the plant. What is a node? A node is the part of a plant stem from which leaves or buds or flowers appear. It is like a joint where the leaves are attached to the stem of the plant. In human terms, we could say that it is like a knuckle. After examining several acres of the crop formation, she documented hundreds of these mysterious blown nodes. When she looked inside the nodes under a microscope, she saw what appeared to be burning cellular structures. The cells were literally exploded apart. This observation alone could rule out any possibility of mechanical flattening by a roller. Mechanical force cannot do this to a plant. Roller would bend the stem of the plant. Yes, but it wouldn't blow the cells apart. That would require immense energy. Like, how much energy does it take to blow apart a node of a plant? Well, according to physicist W.C. Levengood, who examined the same samples, it requires 400 foot-pounds of force. To put that into context, it is equivalent to taking a 2x4x6-inch piece of wood and bending it until it breaks. So whoever or whatever had created this had an incredible amount of energy at its disposal. When Linda showed her findings to agricultural experts at the University of Nottingham, they claimed that the damage was probably caused by an insect known as the rice bug, even though the holes in the plants were way too small for the rice bug to crawl through. The university folks also said that it was impossible for them to test the samples because their equipment was unsophisticated enough to examine such tiny specimens. So in order to get to the bottom of this, Linda decided to send samples to the only biophysicist she knew who had the right equipment, Dr. Walter C. Levengood. Dr. Waldy, as he liked to be called, took one look at the samples and immediately dismissed the possibility of mechanical compression as a cause of the damage. As we mentioned earlier, blowing apart a plant node requires a tremendous amount of energy. Thus, it could not have been caused by any known terrestrial means. Now, remember how we told you that the farmers claimed someone had come in the middle of the night and flattened their crops with a roller? Interestingly, when scientists examined soil samples taken from the area where the plants were flattened, they found a strange concentration of silicon. What does silicon do? Well, it makes the soil hydrophobic, which means that water doesn't mix with it. Water beads up and rolls off the surface of silicon. If this had happened in this particular field, then it could explain why the plants were flattened. However, there were no tire tracks or other evidence of heavy machinery in the field. In fact, Dr. Wally concluded that the damage was consistent with microwave radiation, which is emitted by satellites that are orbiting the Earth. Microwave radiation can deliver immense power and is used in microwave ovens to heat food. It can also be used in military to destroy aircraft engines. It has the ability to burn cellular structures, as was seen in the plant samples that were collected from the site. He also ruled out nuclear radiation as a cause for the damage, because the effect on the plants would have been too immediate. Nuclear radiation takes years to cause damage at the cellular level, but microwaves can do it quickly. The samples that were collected from the site were sent to 2 different labs for analysis, and both concluded the same thing, that the damage was consistent with microwave radiation. Dr. Woolley said that this was one of the most compelling cases of blown nodes that he had ever seen. The sheer number of blown nodes in the field was unprecedented. However, he did find something else in the soil that he couldn't explain. Normally, soil contains a uniform concentration of minerals, but in this particular case, the soil samples showed an anomalous concentration of certain minerals, including silicon. Minerals are like the building blocks of soil. They are like vitamins for plants because they provide essential nutrients that help plants grow. In fact, some soils are so poor in minerals that farmers have to buy and add fertilizer to their fields. So why is this important? Because it could mean that the crop circle wasn't man-made. Yes, someone may have laid the foundation of the crop circle by trampling down the plants, but it is unlikely that the same person would have brought along a massive machine that would emit microwave radiation and then used it to flatten the crops. That would require a lot of planning and resources. Plus, we don't know if something that powerful even exists in the first place. In Dr. Willie's opinion, it is possible that the minerals were deposited by a UFO that hovered over the field while emitting the microwave radiation. Of course, this conclusion is highly speculative, because there is no direct evidence of extraterrestrial life. We do not know if UFOs exist, or if they are piloted by intelligent beings, or even if those beings are friendly. So far, we haven't received any credible evidence that would confirm or deny any of those things. But what do you think? Could this be the first physical evidence of alien life? Or is there another explanation that we are missing here? Let us know in the comments below. As for Linda, After investigating more than 300 crop formations over the years, she remains convinced that most of them are man-made. In fact, she believes that every single crop formation that has appeared since 1978 is the work of a few hoaxers. But what about before 1978? Well, she thinks that maybe someone else was out there doing it back then, but not anymore. Today, there are strict laws against trespassing and farming. Machinery is expensive, so it is not easy to enter a field in the middle of the night and then use a roller to flatten the crops without anyone noticing. Linda's theory is that the hoaxers have all died by now. If that's true, then what are we to make of the soil samples that show an anomalous concentration of minerals, especially silicon? Well, maybe that is also part of the hoax. Maybe the same people who flatten the crops also spread the minerals on the soil to cover their tracks. Interestingly, Linda's theory was tested in 1996 when a group of teenagers came forward and confessed to flattening some of the crop circles. They even showed reporters how they did it. They used a simple roller that they made out of old car tires. But there was one problem. The crop formations that they showed reporters were not from the same year. They were from 1980. By that time, they said that whoever was making the crop formations had already stopped. It appears that the teenagers were trying to replicate the crop formations, but they couldn't quite get it right. According to Linda, the real formations are always circular and they are always perfect. But the ones made by the teenagers were long and skinny. They resembled more of a road that had been plowed by a tractor rather than a circle. However, we should point out that there have been other people who have come forward claiming that they were involved in creating crop formations. Some of them say that they were guided by aliens, but how do we know that they're telling the truth? Do we really have physical proof that would confirm that aliens are visiting our world? No, we don't. Until then, we should remain open-minded. There is still a lot that we don't understand about the universe. Just because we can't explain something doesn't mean that it's a hoax. In the absence of physical evidence to the contrary, we should remain open to the idea that there could be life beyond Earth. After all, we have discovered thousands of planets that could potentially support life. And if life arose on even one of them, then the chances of life arising elsewhere are incredibly high. Some people think that if aliens exist, they must be very far away, but that's not necessarily the case. If aliens exist, then they could be living in the stars. Stars are just like giant light bulbs that hang from the ceiling of the universe. Why wouldn't aliens want to live on a planet that orbits a star? Wouldn't that be a great place to call home? We should also consider the vast amount of time that is available for life to arise. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. Life arose on it about 3.5 billion years ago. That gave life a head start of about 1 billion years. Who's to say that the same thing didn't happen on other planets? Perhaps life arose on many of them, but it just hasn't been discovered yet. Maybe we should be asking ourselves, if there are no aliens, then what? Why do we keep seeing things that we can't explain? Are we really meant to believe that every single unexplained phenomenon is a hoax? Is it really that hard to accept the possibility that there could be something out there that we don't understand? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a thumbs up. Also make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Stay tuned for more updates. Why did author Linda Moulton Howe choose to self-publish a new book? Hello, this is your host. Thank you so much for joining me today in this special episode. Linda Moulton Howe has been reporting on UFOs and related phenomena since the early 70s. Her first story aired on KTVU in Oakland, California, where she was a reporter. That story was about an Air Force sergeant who claimed that he had seen a UFO crash in the desert outside of Las Vegas. The story ran for 90 minutes. And what happened was there was such an overwhelming response from viewers who called in with their own stories of UFO sightings that it actually became one of the top 10 news stories in the nation. And so this really kind of launched her career. She went on to do other stories on UFO. She met with military witnesses, intelligence witnesses. And then in the early 80s, she started hearing about strange cattle mutilations. In Colorado, there were these cattle mutilations happening, and the ranchers were worried because they would find their cows dead and certain parts would be missing, like the reproductive organs, tongues, eyes, sometimes legs, always very precise incisions. And so she started investigating that. And the more she investigated, the more she learned that not only were these things happening in Colorado, but across the United States and around the world. And so she put out a call on her television program. She said, "I'm looking for witnesses." And she got hundreds of thousands of letters and phone calls from people who described very similar events that had happened to them in rural areas where they found mutilated animals, sometimes even their own pets. And what began to emerge was this pattern that seemed to have all kinds of different pieces of evidence pointing towards some sort of extraterrestrial involvement. And yet, law enforcement and the media were not taking any of this seriously at all. People were they were having their stories mocked. And so she began to take it upon herself to become a voice for these witnesses. In her decades of reporting, she's interviewed literally hundreds of ranchers, farmers, veterinarians, coroners, forensic experts, military intelligence officers, private investigators, and people who have experienced strange phenomena in the sky. And throughout this time, she continued to hear from many of these people who saw these mutilated animals, that they would call her up. They would say, "Linda, you're not going to believe this, but we just found another animal. It's mutilated. We think it might be connected to what happened before. And so she would go out to these scenes, she would take photographs, she would interview the witnesses, and she would gather physical evidence. And in doing so, she amassed probably one of the largest collections of physical evidence that exists today of these alleged mutilation cases. And she has recently published a book called An Alien Cover-Up. They really do want you to know. And today I get to share with you why she decided to sell this book when 3 major publishing houses had told her that they wanted to publish her book, but they could not include graphic images of the cattle mutilations, and she felt that that was absolutely essential to tell the true story. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. So welcome to the show. Linda, thank you so much for being here. It's my pleasure. Tell us about your new book. Well, it's called An Alien Cover-Up. They really don't want you to know. It's 320 pages. It covers cattle mutilations in North America and around the world. It goes back to the beginning. It shows how the mutilations are increasing and becoming more bizarre as time goes by. And it covers I use the word cover-up because in the book I present over 200 photographs of the mutilation sites and the animals themselves. And I also give you information about the cattle mutilation archive that I built up over 40 years. You know, the best thing I can do is kind of summarize what the reaction has been from readers who have read the book because it has exceeded anything that I could have hoped for. Readers are writing to me and saying, I didn't believe in aliens or UFOs or any of that stuff, but now I do. This book changed my mind, and the reason for that is because the photographs are so compelling and the number of witnesses is so compelling. When you look at the cattle mutilation archive online, which is linked in the book, you can see over 300 cases. There's a map of the United States and around the world where these mutilations are happening, and it is impossible to explain these away as just some mad cow disease or some person on the ground doing it. It doesn't make sense. Now, let's talk about why you chose to self-publish this book. So when I wrote this book, I knew that I was going to be in conflict with mainstream publishers because for over 40 years I've reported on cattle mutilations, and I've always included the most graphic photographs in my reports. And if you don't include those photographs, you don't have the story. So one presented the book proposal to 3 major publishers. 2 of them took it and then rejected it after they had it for months and months, saying that they couldn't sell it because of the photos. And then the 3rd publisher said, we want to publish it, we want to change the photos. And so I finally said, okay, I'll self-publish it. I'd never done that before. I wasn't sure how to go about doing that, but I knew that I had to self-publish in order to keep the photos. And when I self-published it, I thought maybe it would be a small group of UFO believers who bought it. But the reaction has been so much broader than that. Okay, so how did you feel when you heard from those publishing companies that they wanted to publish your book, but they couldn't include the graphic images? I was disappointed, but I knew that I would not compromise. And that's something that I teach children. I teach them, don't ever compromise your principles. And so I couldn't do that. And I knew that the book would not be successful without the photos. So I had to go forward with some. So what advice would you give to other authors who may be in a similar situation, where they need to include certain types of images or evidence in order to tell the full story? Well, I think that every writer has to decide for themselves what's important to the story. For me, it was the photos. Without the photos, it's not the same story. If you're a writer, you have to stay true to yourself. You have to stay true to the story. And if that means going with a smaller press, perhaps even self-publishing, it's worth it. Your integrity is worth it. And so I think that you have to do what feels right to you. So how did you go about the process of self? I worked with an editor who helped me with the photos and formatting and everything else. And he said, you're ready to go. So I did an initial print run and I sent out about 500 copies. And then I had a few hundred left. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, I'll put it online. And I started getting orders immediately. Within 2 weeks, I sold out the entire printing. And I didn't realize that it would be received so positively. Do you have plans to do a second printing? Oh, yes, I do. I'm working on that right now. Okay, how can people purchase your book? They can go to my website, .com, and they can order the book there. And how does it feel to hold your book in your hands, knowing the amount of work that went into it and the importance of the story? It feels wonderful. I mean, it's something that I've worked on for over 40 years and I still work on it. And so it's an ongoing investigation, and it feels wonderful to hold that in my hands. I still have a hard time believing that I am holding the actual book that I wrote and edited. So I have a question for you. Why do you think that this topic is so important? Why is it something that you continue to investigate and report on even though you've been ridiculed for it? I think it's important because the witnesses deserve a voice. They deserve for people to take them seriously. And for most of history, they haven't been taken seriously. And they're good, sane, sober, moral, prudent people. They re farmers and ranchers who love their land and their animals and would undo anything to jeopardize their reputation or their livelihood. And yet they're ridiculed when they come forward and they say, I saw something strange. I found an animal that's been mutilated. I want to tell the police and I want to tell somebody, and they're ridiculed. And I think that's wrong. And I think we need to take them seriously. All right, Linda, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. Thank you.